Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be going over my finished build showcase for the Poison Soulrend of the Spiral Pathfinder. This is my league starter for Necropolis League. Now, normally, I usually like to take my league starters to like about 100 divines worth of investment, which is about as much as I put into this build, and then I farm for the next build. But actually, I'm going to be joining a private league with a few friends and we're going to be doing that instead this time around. I don't like over investing in my builds, so I usually stop around that 100 divine line and just move on. And that's what we did with this character. So the idea of this build is we're building around one of the new transfigured gems, Soulrend of the Spiral. This was released last patch, and the idea is it's like normal Soulrend, except it shoots out in a spiral. So as we add projectiles, it'll shoot clockwise to your character, and if you add more projectiles, it'll keep going around your character. Now, the normal Soulrend, it doesn't really have that much damage scaling, to be honest. It's kind of meh in terms of damage scaling, but Soulrend of the Spiral has significantly more options in terms of damage scaling, and that is because of its mechanics. So the first part of the mechanic is whenever you shoot out Soulrend of the Spiral, normally the first projectile is the only thing that hits, and then if you add actually up to, I believe, 6 additional projectiles and make another clockwise rotation, you can actually hit twice instead of just once. So the first projectile hits, then it shoots around like a few projectiles, then it gets back to front of you, which then it shoots out another projectile which can hit. Now, that's the normal behavior, and I didn't actually invest too much into that, and that's because I needed a dying sun, but like I said, I didn't want to invest too much into the character. But the other way you can abuse Soulrend of the Spiral is utilizing return projectile support, or with a Nimbus. Either way works. So if you're sitting inside of a target and you have the projectiles coming back with Soulrend, those projectiles will actually hit the target because they count as new projectiles because of the way return projectile support works and Nimbus works. This means that we can get a very large amount of hits very quickly. So every single time I click my right click, I get about like, I think it's currently 9 projectiles with my Soulrend, and all of those 9 projectiles can hit the same target if I'm sitting right on top of them. Now, that's actually one of the bigger problems of this build, is the fact that to do single target, good single target, you need to sit on top of the enemy, which makes things very awkward. Thankfully, we're playing a Pathfinder and we're tanky enough for the most part. As you can see, I can just sit on top of this T17 map boss and delete him, but I will say this is not comfortable at all, and I would not say that this build is a bosser at all. What I would say though is I was very enjoying like its mapping potential, mainly because of the fact that when you actually use Unleash and greater multiple projectiles of Soulrend of the Spiral, it has a very interesting interaction. So there is a delay whenever you cast Soulrend of the Spiral, whenever it shoots out the projectile. So it'll shoot it out in a clockwise fashion, right? And that has a delay. So if you add more projectiles, there's even more of a delay. So until you shoot out all of your projectiles. And then when you use Unleash as well, you can actually cast Soulrend of the Spiral and start moving. And as you're moving, you will be shooting out Soulrends constantly, which is very cool, as it means that I cast my Soulrend of the Spiral once, and then I walk through a few packs. They all die because I'm playing a Pathfinder with Poison Prolif, and then I move on, which is cool. That's really nice, as that means the build works pretty well for map clear. And I actually farmed, I think like it was like a very large amount of dunes using my back to basic strategy, which I'll be linking down below if you want that. But essentially, I was having a very comfortable time with mapping, and since we're investing into cast speed because we're, a self-cast build, we actually can utilize lightning warp for movement. So my mapping actually ended up being pretty good for this character. Now, of course, like I said, this character was pretty good as my league starter, but I wouldn't suggest pushing it farther. You can put more currency into it, but it has a few downsides. Like I said, you have to sit on top of the target, and another downside is Soulrend of the Spiral has an absolutely absurd mana cost. So its base mana cost is 60, and if you put on a 6 link on it, it can get well over 400 mana cost. And now that reduced mana cost is not easy to get anymore like it used to be, it's very hard to deal with said mana cost. Thankfully, we have ways out by utilizing life tap. Now, every single time I cast my Soulrend of the Spiral, it costs like 1,000 life. Now, you must be wondering, Dread, that's absurd. How would you ever sustain that much? Well, let me introduce you to Pathfinder. So with Pathfinder and with the correct flask being rolled, we can get well over 1,000 life. I think it's like well over 4,000 life per second with our flask. So that is thanks to all of the Pathfinder stuff, and increased effective flask, life recovery flask effect, and the unique belt Tides of Time. So Tides of Time, it gives you a bunch of flask charges per second, which is great for our build, and it also gives you flask effect, which is multiplicative with the next line, which is life recovery from flask. This combined makes it so that we essentially are like immortal, obviously, quote unquote, right? Obviously you can still die, but we gain a very large amount of life per second. That is all of our sustain, and it's very hard to die when you're gaining like 4k life per second. Now, I could invest more into the build, put more emphasis on defenses, but like I said, I'm pretty much done with the character. Now, with all that being said, let's go in game and talk about it more in detail. All right, so here we're in game with the character. So let's go over the passive tree real quick. So I did something unique that I would normally advise against doing, and I wanted to try playing the build without utilizing cluster jewels. So why are cluster jewels so important for this build for the most part? Well, that is because most like poison damage builds, right, chaos damage builds in general, they utilize cluster jewels for their percent damage because there's not that much poison damage percentage and not that much chaos damage percentage on the tree. But I wanted to challenge myself in not doing that, right? So let's look over here in our POB. So if you look at our calculations, we only have 457% increased damage. If you're utilizing something like cluster jewels, this would be very easy to reach, but without those, it would be very hard to reach. So where is most of our percent damage coming from? So we have a Dendrobate here with percent poison on it. That's 100% of it. Then we have a Circle of Nostalgia, which is 70% of it, right? And then we also gain a decent amount from jewels. So we get percent damage with poison here on jewels like this. We actually get a massive amount, 40% here against marked enemies, and we're snipers marking enemies anyways, so that we can gain frenzy charges on hit. And those splits do shotgun, by the way. And that is most of our percent damage, and then all we need to do is focus our tree on getting damage over time multiplier, and then getting like cast speed, then getting tankiness with like suppression, and then all the flask nodes. And all that combined means that we don't actually need to invest with cluster jewels on this build, specifically because I ended up utilizing a Dendrobate. Now, that's the passive tree in total. Like I said, to completely min-max this, you probably want to be going with Adorn jewel stacking like every other build in the entire game currently. So let's talk about our items a little bit here. So items. So what items did I choose and why? So for our chest here, we chose a +2 corrupted with duration gems Dendrobate. Why is that? Well, covenants are technically better, but you could very easily get a +2 Dendrobate really early on, and then you can, 6-link it with Tainted Orbs of Fusing. If you don't know how to do that, I would just look it up online. And Dendrobates have, of course, that percent damage and also poison duration. So Dendrobate is actually a pretty good chest overall, unironically, very early on. Like I said, later on, you could replace this with like a rare chest piece with like better modifiers, or you could run a Covenant, like I said. But that +2 to duration gems is very important because getting plus levels on our Soulrend of the Spiral is one of the best ways of scaling our damage. As you can tell, we're gaining a very large amount of flat damage just by using very high gems, right? Which is cool. Another item that we're utilizing that's important, I'm using a replica Dragonfang's Flight with +3 to Soulrend. This was pretty cheap when I looked it up on trade on the first few days, because not many people are actually playing Soulrend. But of course, if more people play Soulrend, these will actually go up in price and you might not be able to get it. But with Necropolis crafting, I believe you can make +2 amulets pretty easily, unironically, right? Then for our weapons here, what I did was I just grabbed Profaned Wands with +1 Chaos Spell Skill Gems Fractures. Then I just re-rolled the cast speed essences until I got dot multi, and then I crafted chaos percent damage on both of them. That was pretty easy. Obviously, you know, you could do much better with Necropolis crafting, but I avoided that like the plague because it is insanely complicated for absolutely no reason. Then the helmet here, fizz damage taken as Ellie. That's very important as you have not many sources of fizz damage taken. Obviously, suppress resistances, like a decent helmet that I crafted on day 2. Nimbus is actually going. I don't know what Nimbus is actually at right now. It was at 70 divines when I bought it, and now it is at 60 divines. So it actually went down in price. So my build actually got cheaper. But Nimbus is nice, but you don't actually need a Nimbus. You can actually utilize a, you can actually take out this deadly ailments and then run a return projectiles. Now this will reduce your damage significantly, but it was enough to like just farm content till I could get access to the Nimbus and then buy the Nimbus. But that's like one of the bigger upgrades you can go for. Another big upgrade is Tides of Time. Of course, getting that life recovery from flasks and that flask effect. Remember, those two are actually multiplicative with each other because the flask applied to you is a different modifier to the life recovery flask. So Tides of Time is absolutely insane for our build. I don't know how much it is right now. It's like, 70C. That's not even that much. It's like 1 divine when I bought it. Obviously, you'd eventually want a utility flask gain charges so you can sustain a dying sun, but that's like here or there currently. Gloves here, we're running Asenath's Gentle Touch, mainly for the explosions. This plus the poison prolif and the global poison chance means that we can actually clear really quickly, especially those thicker maps. But we also like it because the curse on temporal chains on hit, meaning that we do not need to cast temporal chains for ourselves, even though it's a lesser quality curse. Boots here, just boots with like stats. I bought these specifically because they had strength and int on them, although you don't necessarily need that. Like eventually you'd want to upgrade these boots. Right now they're just like whatever right now, to be honest. Like I said, Circle of Nostalgia with the buff effect and the percent damage. This is a very good ring for damage, and you know, you can eventually get rid of it later on, but I just like Circles of Nostalgia. They're early, cheap, and easy to use. The life flask for our build actually is very specific. We use an eternal life flask with reduced charges per use so that we can spam it and then recover an additional 16% of life recovery amount over 10 seconds if used while not in full life. That actually gives us even more recovery, as you can tell, because guess what? We're never on full life whenever we're casting things. So that's really cool, right? And what's really cool about this is if you are taking damage and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, ooh, all you need to do, just press the gem. I mean, just stop casting. Literally just stop casting, and all of a sudden you have like 4k life per second. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Taste of Hate, obviously, for the less damage taken, you know, less fizz damage taken. Granite Flask, Onslaught Flask for the cast speed. Eventually you could actually replace this with the Dying Sun, which would be cool. I just didn't do it because I was too lazy. Then the we got the chance to avoid being stunned on the Quicksilver so that we don't get stunned. That's really cool. That's pretty much it for the gear. I don't think there's any specific jewels that are specific to this build. We just like life, poison, like percent damage, right? It's like not too crazy. I think that's pretty much it. For Pantheons, I just went with the can't be stunned. You actually need I think you can actually go with this one instead now, because I believe with my flasks up I'm stun immune. I just forgot to fix that. Or you can go for the less damage taken, either way. And then for the one that you want to use, the mini one is more important because not only do you gain life flask charges if you haven't used it recently, you also get the 60% increased life recovery from flasks when used on low life. That actually is really nice because since we're utilizing Petrified Blood as one of our auras here, we can't recover above 50% with normal means, which is low life. But that means so that whenever we like sit here, we're going to gain in like significantly more life per second with this. So actually going to low life and then pressing the flask is actually better for your sustain than like just pressing it like right there, right? That's really cool. So that's Pantheons there. Then for like skill gems and stuff, the main thing we care about is just getting our aura set up here. Determination, We got the Determination. Where's the other ones? Petrified Blood here. Then for our other ones, we got Herald of Agony as well, because of the buff effect for the more damage with poison chance. Then Purity of Elements, because I was too lazy to craft Ellie avoid boots. It's like whatever, like who cares? But yeah, like that's our auras. I think yeah, that's our auras. Then we get Call to Arms and Automation for Steel Skinned, and Call to Arms for Enduring Cry for the endurance charges. For other skills, our 6-link, right? I'm using a Lightning Warp with faster casting, swift affliction, and less duration, so I can like just teleport across the map very quickly. I have a Frost Blink for boss fights as well, because like being able to like dodge boss abilities with Frost Blink is really nice. I have Sniper's Mark, of course, because Sniper's Mark with projectile builds, right? Really strong. And that's pretty much it for the character for the most part. That's gonna be it for the video. With all that being said, this has been Dread. I have to go do something else. Bye.